Hello. I'm only 34 minutes late this time.
It's very true. And I have no time limit restriction this time, so less stressed about pushing you.
I've been trying to get our friend Matthew Castanelli to build a shortcut for iOS that people can start a timer for when I'm late, and then it will auto-populate a spreadsheet to basically show how many hours of people's lives that I've wasted, and then because it's bad. It's so bad, and I need to be like, no, boss people, this is my time. There's no crying this time, though, so I have no excuse. None, and I apologize.
Well, the good part is I'm never just sitting staring at my computer. I always have something I can be doing.
Don't tell me that.
I mean,
No.
Never mind. Alex, I sit here and stare at my computer waiting for you to call me every time, and it's always heartbreaking when I am not talking to you.
Exactly. It's all about me. That's
yes. Which sometimes it is. Like yesterday when you had a special delivery.
Oh, are we going to talk about that?
Oh, yeah, we're talking about that. We're talking about the friend tree because you are loved and appreciated.
I still don't know about... I still don't really understand how the friend tree happened, but I came home to my apartment and saw a gigantic palm tree with gigantic palms / ferns. I still don't really know what they're called, but I have been told by my plant dad, Trin Garitano, that they are also called palms. And so and on it there was a piece of paper that said friend tree that Maddie had decorated, but I ignored that and immediately, without questioning anything, just sat beneath it. And by sat, I mean lied underneath it for about a half hour and just was silent. And I didn't realize that Matt had recorded it and then put it on Instagram. But then I received a book filled with messages from people, and then I cried for the rest of the night, and I fell asleep under the tree, much like I do Christmas trees as well. And
Aww.
how did this friendship? I'm still confused. I still don't know what happened. I just know there's a beautiful tree that reminds me of my favorite place in Florida, and every time I look at it, it makes me so happy. And I thought I didn't care about material things, but this is now the most important thing in my life. Although everybody keeps assuring me that if it dies, it does not mean the death of friendship.
Yes.
It's just a nice thing for me to enjoy in the meantime.
Yeah, basically, your fantastic wife sent out a massive Twitter DM group thing, which I did not realize was a thing, but apparently it is, that you can group DM people now, and was
God.
Hey, Alex has been having a bad day, what can we do? And magic happened, and suddenly there was a tree. That part I don't know, you'll have to ask Trin. I just know suddenly it existed and was just oh, we're going there. Okay, that's cool. And so sent notes, and yeah. So I'm sorry you've been having a couple bad days and a rough time, but you are so loved.
I thought when you said I think the topic of today's show should be bad days, I assumed that you were having a bad day, and then... And so I was like, fuck, I really got to get back. Kathy's having a shitty day. Oh man. Well, so how was your day?
Surprise! Although, yeah, yesterday I had a bad day. I spilled some of the milk when I was pouring it into the bag, which made me want to cry.
Oh no.
And then I took a shower because I had sticky milk all over my hand. And so I got out of the shower and just kind of had like existential, I'm just going to lay here in my bed wrapped in a towel for a while. And then my fantastic, amazing, lovely daughter comes upstairs and says, Mommy, there's something wrong in the kitchen, which is never words you want to say. And so I recorded last week an episode for The Incomparable about beer. And I had a leftover bottle of beer that I was planning on using for cooking because it was a smoky tasting one. Spoiler for the beer episode. But I hadn't gotten around to it yet. And so it was just sitting in the fridge. Unfortunately, I'd put it on the door. And when she very excitedly closed the door of the refrigerator, it spilled. And so now my kitchen smells kind of like smoky beer.
That could be such a good thing, but had such terrible consequences.
Right. I just was kind of like, oh, okay. And yeah, so I just kind of was like, I'm just going to lay here in bed. And yeah. So yesterday was kind of a meh day, but knowing that you got a friend tree helped make it better. And then just kind of like whatever. But because of this, I wanted to talk about what you do when you have a bad day. Like, how can you, and I'm not talking about like a depressive or anxiety episode. I'm talking about just like where the world seems out to get you. Nothing you feel can be done right. Like, how do you fix that?
That is a very interesting question because you're right. It's hard to separate the bad days. Like one of my favorite books when I was a kid was Alexander and the No Good Terrible or No Good Horrible
Terrible No Good Very Bad.
Yes.
Terrible Horrible No Good Very Bad Day. That's what it is.
And I just adored it because, well, one, Alexander, and then I just always was like, yes, Alexandra. And it was sort of this comforting thing of, yep, shit happens. It was the childhood version. Like there was everybody poops and also shit happens, but they're two different kinds. And I noticed that he didn't really cope that well with what was going on around him, but I also I know this is I promise this is not one of Alex's weird all over the place stories. I am there's gonna be a thread, and so when you were telling me the story about just you lying in bed filled with dread, it is an interesting way to cope, especially when things go wrong and it's no one's fault. Right. And I think that is the hardest. That's when I'm at my worst, is when there are problems that there's no way for me to solve them, and I didn't even cause those problems because I'm great at hating myself. Like, at least that is an activity I can do. And at least if I'm having some, if my brain's being a little bit broken and not acting like it should be, at least then my brain, while it does induce self-loathing that's irrational, I can be like, hey, this is an irrational thought. You should do something about this, meditate, whatever, which I know it's like bonkers logic, but it's the days where it's a no good, terrible, horrible, very bad day and no one's at fault, nothing can be done. That is when I am very bad with coping mechanisms. That's when I lie underneath a tree and cry and can't even bring myself to write all of my friends who sent me beautiful messages. And this morning I didn't even hear about the logistics of how apparently there are tree delivery people, which I should have known.
Of course, there are tree delivery people.
Yeah, like I guess I guess not everybody who has a like living, well, not living, a real Christmas tree doesn't have the means to like bring one to their home. But I guess my answer is I have a very difficult time with that. And then it becomes a sort of it's almost like a cart before the horse kind of thing, in terms of like in terms of a mental illness of like, because there's absolutely nothing to be done, other stuff that isn't great about myself is exacerbated. I like to think I don't lash out at other people, which is absolutely something I do when my brain is not cooperating. But I just kind of shut down, I guess, and I am lucky when there is work to be done or something to do, but I've got like a lot of family members in the hospital, and there's literally nothing to be done. They're far away, can't visit them. Like, I've done everything, mailed stuff, done, I'm on the text chains of like sending happy gifts, but at some point you just need to sit there, and this will be another episode, but that gets to almost the faith aspect of my bot brain goes into like it sort of breaks down, and I will turn to prayer sometimes, which any Christians listening, anybody who's religious listening, this is probably like, yep, you do the thing. and I do. So yeah, anyway, done with that. How about you? You seem like you would have a lot of good, because you have a lot of struggles, and you are such a positive person. And as we've addressed before, that does not mean that you are not allowed to have terrible, shitty, no good, horrible fucking days. But other than just sitting in a towel, lying in a towel, what do you find anything that like helps you specifically?
So when it's specifically something that I cannot do anything about, like family or friends in the hospital, or deaths, or something where my helping is at a loss. Specifically, I'm thinking of, I had a period of time when I was recovering after giving birth where like I could not even hold my phone in my hand. Like, my body was so weak that it was too much to do that. And I did not have, and still do not have, the iPhone XS Max.
I wasn't gonna make the joke. I thought I shouldn't make the joke.
No,
okay,
I went there.
The joke.
I went there for you. So it's not even that it was a size thing, which is a whole other conversation, by the way. But anyways, I had no energy. I couldn't, like, I could get up to go to the bathroom, and that was about the limit of what I could do. And that was really hard mentally, because I couldn't take care of anybody. I could barely take care of myself. But I also realized that I couldn't do any of my main coping mechanisms, which one of the biggest things that I like to do is just leave, get out of the house, go to like Target or a coffee shop, or go get, even just the act of like going to the grocery store and getting one or two things and checking out and coming back tends to do a slight reset. Being able to, because again, putting this out there, I am an extrovert, and so I get energy fed off by interacting with people. And so if I need more energy, a lot of times going out and interacting with people, strangers, seeing, and especially with strangers, like I'll have a harder time if I actually see people that I know. And in my small town, that happens fairly often. But being able to go out and interact with strangers to where I can not necessarily pretend to be happy, but can remind myself that what happiness or like that positivity can feel like almost. So I'm not I wouldn't say that I'm like faking it, but I guess I kind of am like faking that happiness to remind myself what the happiness is. But it just lets me kind of refresh my brain to become more positive again.
It doesn't feel like you're faking. It almost feels like you're stretching your happiness muscles.
Yes, I like that. Yeah, you know, because when your body is hurting, like, okay, yeah, you want to get out of your chair and kind of stretch your body a little bit. And so, yeah, stretching my happiness muscles, I like that.
Are you okay with asking for help when you need it? Because I know that there are just times when there's nothing anybody can do, even if they want to. But what about when you're having a bad day and you need help?
I think it depends on maybe what type of bad day, or what kind of help I think would be needed. So, for example, like when I was recovering and having a bad day, but also like physically could not do it, it was a lot easier for me to say, hey, Avi, would you walk the dog? Or Mom, can you bring us dinner? Or something along those lines. If it's more of a, like last night when I was just like the world, if I talk to my daughter, I'm going to yell at her, or like not yell, like talk harshly in her general direction, and then make her cry and feel bad. Like there really wasn't anything that anyone else could do in that situation. So there was no reason for me to ask for help because there was no help that necessarily could be given. So I have a hard time asking for help if I can't think of a solution that somebody could, or be able to ask for a very specific request, if that makes sense.
Have you ever thought about asking someone like, hey, I'm not asking for help with my problem. I'm asking if you have a solution that I have not thought of. Does that make sense, sort of? I'm trying to think.
I know.
Like maybe reaching out to other folks who are pumping, or like, this isn't a judgment on your coping skills at all. This is me thinking about how I cope with things and how I just, I just don't reach out. It's not a thing I do. But I guess that I do sometimes reach out to folks who I know have had a very similar experience, because it feels like I am asking them to do less emotional labor, because I never feel like, and I know it's not true, and I know everybody will tell me that I am deserving of emotional labor for when people want to give it to me, but that's just not something that I can accept, especially when I'm in that state of mind.
Right.
So, and is it almost then like you, like almost asking for help would then in itself be sort of emotional labor, because then like you don't know what to ask for?
Yeah. I feel like the effort and energy it would take to find somebody in that specific area, because, you know, I have so much segmented areas in my life. You know, I'm a caregiver, I'm a mother, I'm a surrogate, I'm pumping, I'm self-employed, I work from home, like all of these things, the energy and effort to try and find who to reach out to makes it almost like not possible to help.
Yeah.
Because that's really hard to like, okay, who can I bother? Who do I feel like I can approach with this issue to have them do free emotional labor for me for a situation that I don't even know if that's possible, that anything can be done. Makes it that barrier to entry makes it difficult.
For sure. And we haven't yet talked a ton about how you're also a caregiver to your spouse. And I can't even I can bring myself to lightly imagine because
Yeah.
I have been sort of a caretaker in a very different sense for my spouse, but only for very limited amounts of time at very like like a few months at most.
Yeah.
And it's such a stupid question to ask.
No.
Is it so much harder not to like have sort of the same partnership you used to have? But because I'm going to assume that the answer is, well, duh. But I guess how have those coping mechanisms changed from when you used to have bad days?
Yeah, it's so funny because I actually was thinking about this yesterday when Maddie was reaching out, because Ryan isn't able to. I mean, he could, but he couldn't necessarily do something like that. Because the amount of effort or like just that the thought of being able to wouldn't necessarily cross his mind.
Right.
And that definitely, it made me sad.
Yeah.
In a way, because so we're coming up in 2 months, it will have been 8 years since his stroke. And I'm sure we'll talk about it as it gets closer and go through that entire process, because that was what my speech at UL was about, was that whole event that happened. But I haven't really talked about like what life is like now necessarily, because it is very different. It's so different than when we were first married, when our daughter was young and when I was working out of the house, and all of these decisions were, mutual. We were a partnership. We were in the entire relationship together. And while we still are, there's a portion of it where all the decision making is still on me. All of the bills are my responsibility. All of our housing, anything car related, school related, signing, Ryan doesn't go to parent teacher conferences. He watches the videos of Avi dancing when we come home and I show it to him. So we're recording this on Tuesday and I leave to Orlando on Thursday for a week and he doesn't come with us. And there's all of those things that are, it's very difficult to deal with. And there isn't, so when he first had his stroke, I tried reaching out, finding like young caregivers for stroke victims, and it's like non-existent.
Yeah.
There is an organization that I think is British or Canadian, I can't remember. It's called National Orange Popsicle Week, for young stroke victims. But of course, it's in a different country, so they don't necessarily have anything that I can communicate with. But back then, there was nothing. I mean, you could find caregivers for stroke victims, but they were parents, or caregivers for spouses that were younger, but it was like cancer which is very different because there's a terminal factor and there's like different levels, and so it's, I think that the fact that I couldn't find any sort of like communicating support group outside of myself, I built up these coping mechanisms to survive. To the point where I started therapy a couple of years ago, because I'm like, am I handling this okay? Like, is this an okay way to handle it? Which is kind of a silly question to ask.
No, not at all.
But like, I wanted to make sure that because I have been able to compartmentalize and manage this stuff in such a way that I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to get hit by this incredible wave of like just crap because I had just locked everything away instead of like been able to manage it and like an adult.
Right. And even as you say that, I'm thinking about times that I've gone to therapy and asked pretty much the exact same question, and some therapists just can't answer that. I mean, like, like you have, I mean, there aren't organizations, and there aren't people who are in the same position, or aren't many, I should say, who are connected, like, people who are caregivers to older folks or people with cancer. And like, were you able to get an answer, or were they like, I don't know? Because I've gone to therapists with way what I would think of as easier questions, and they're like, huh. Like, I wonder how many people have stumped therapists the way I have. It's not great to hear, just like when a doctor goes, that's not good, is the same, when your therapist says, I don't know. It's not always good.
Yeah, I lucked out in that the therapist that I went to has known my family for years, is the same therapist that my mom sees and that my brother has gone to, and like all of these things. So she knew the story. She knew about Ryan's stroke. She knew how all that happened. So I came in to her office with a sense of I don't have to explain from scratch, which I think was really good. I don't know if I would have even been comfortable going to... No, I would have been comfortable going, but I don't know if I would have been able to reach out and say, hey, I need help with someone that I would have had to talk from scratch, because I probably would have put up my everything's fine face.
Right.
Instead of being able to really like open up as quickly as I did.
Well, what do you think then? I don't want this to be another episode where I just bum you out the whole time, especially because you helped give me a fucking friendship. But what are the... I'm glad that you have systems in place for very bad days, or a series of very, very bad days, or at least it seems like that. Yeah. What about when it's just like you said, that day the world, it feels like the world is out to get you?
You kind of just like, I just kind of have to retreat from the world so that the world can't come and get me anymore.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's so true.
And I don't know how healthy that is, but for my own sanity, because I just can't even anymore. Like, you just have to kind of run away, and get into your safe space. And eat ice cream and watch terrible movies, and just kind of, protect that little self that you have, as best you can.
See, I think that is very healthy for you, because we just even talked about how you eventually just need to exercise your happiness muscles, and you're an extrovert, so you're going to need to, leave that bubble for a bit, whereas I'm the kind of person who, once I'm in the bubble, it's very hard to pop it, and it's very hard for other people to pop it too. Like, it's my firmware is like updated. There are just I mean, even Maddie finds it hard to penetrate them. God, why do I don't want to make sex jokes? I'm good. The bubble is hard to pop. And it has that ever been a thing for you, where you don't want to reach out when you don't know the answer, but have you ever been in your bubble and then you do know the solution, but it's like you still don't want anybody to burst your bubble?
I'm trying to think, and my memory is really, really bad in some instances, and something like this where it's like, here, think of a specific thing like this, and if it doesn't come to me right away, I'm kind of like, and I don't know, it's entirely possible. I know, like, I've had, well, and it's hard too, because don't forget, I work from home.
Yeah.
So there are definitely days where I won't see anybody other than my family for a week. But it's also not as possible because I have to take Avi to dance classes, and I have to get groceries for the family. And so I don't necessarily have the luxury to fully hide out for a week in my bubble because other people are relying on me. And so I will suck it up and practice my happiness muscles, or my work on my resting bitch face, to not have to deal with happiness muscles. Because if, we need milk in the house, then I have to go and get milk. Although, I have been able to occasionally, I'll be like, I just can't, and be like, hey, Dad, can you get me milk? Or, Matt, my brother, are you out and about? Can you get me milk? Or the neighbor, hey, I need this type of a thing. So but it's very rare that I would be in such a bubble that I couldn't do something that my family needed.
Do you think that came with age and experience before you had a family, or even just before you met Ryan? Like, were you the same way? Like, oh yeah, I've got to take care of my friends or my family? Or did it just become sort of an instinct afterwards? Because I also sort of have the thing, the consequences would not be as dire or anything, but I have many, like, it's so strange because I don't have any direct employees, but I have a lot of people who, even if it's a small part of their livelihood, it's enough that it would really fuck up some stuff if, like, I did not do my job, and as a result, like, they don't get paid. So right. there's no like if I like fuck something up, then someone could lose their daycare for a month, or they might not be able to buy groceries that week. And
Right.
and I always have had that it's sort of easy for me to go about the world in my bubble at this point, but still have it, intact. And even now, we will talk about this at some. I'm not trying to like gaslight people and be like, oh, spoilers, Maddie was in the hospital before, but and I've like talked about this, but I just didn't talk about it on Due by Friday at the time, because I was in my bubble and I could not, as the kids say.
Yes.
But when Maddie was in the hospital, I was even impressed with myself. Like, it was like I had snorted a bunch of like love cocaine and like love and responsibility cocaine, because it's not like I can't take care of myself. I was very good at it for a very long time. With the exception of the mental illness stuff and people having backtracking. I was very shitty at taking care of myself when I was not in a good state of mind. But that was also when I was redesigning the studio and at our office, and like it was one of the busiest times of my life, and I held it together to the point where even afterwards, it's not like I even needed like downtime the way most introverts do, I was like fueled by I needed to go visit him in the hospital every day, like it. And sure, it was only maybe a month of my life, but I wasn't tired that entire month, which is super, super different. Like, obviously, if that had kept going, you just burn out. But was there, and I don't know, maybe it was the aspect of the family as well as the obligation of this thing needs to get built. Otherwise, people can't record and they don't get paid, or like, or my boss will be very sad and then angry with me.
There's an essence almost of you got to do what you got to do.
I wonder though, I'm gonna say it. I've met a lot of people who are just not like that.
Yeah,
they're just
that's true.
Not.
And I mean, this is something. So, like, I'm thinking of when I was in college. I was a multimedia art design, whatever major for a while, until I was told that I had taken all the wrong classes, and that in order to graduate, I would, because of the way that the schedule worked, it would probably be another 3 to 4 years.
College.
To which I was like, no. And I could have continued that path or whatnot, but instead I went to the front office and I was like, hey, these are my classes. What will get me out of here faster? And in that time, I also decided to take an internship at Walt Disney World, and like that got me a kind of a mental refresh, get me out of this place, this location. I just can't even, but I still, I needed to keep my scholarships and I needed to keep my loans and grants active and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did online schooling. And of course, for the record, this was back in the day when dial-up was basically your best option. And I didn't have internet in my the apartment that I was staying at. I had to go down into like a computer lab while I was working at Disney. But, I did what I had to do. Then I came home, and I actually ended up, for the last year and a half of my degree, I lived at home and drove for 2 hours to school Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then did the classes that I could do, and then drove home every week for a year and a half.
Oh, you're such a fucking badass.
But I did what I had to do to graduate because it was cheaper to live at home and I could get a better job up here and not have to worry about roommates, and I didn't have to worry about all of that crap. And I just did what I had to do for my best life.
Man, all snaps in a Z or triangle. I don't know what the kids are doing these days.
Yeah,
oh
I
God,
don't know
I'm so
either.
old. But that is also why I admire you, because as different as we are, I think we both have the same, just got to do it. And when people are like, how you doing? How you holding up? I'm like, well, this is how it is. Like, I'm like, well, I'm not dead right now. Like,
right. Like, I'm healthy-ish. I like have a roof over my head. I have a job. I have like all of these things in place that mean, this is, you know, let me find the positive, because I can't find the dwelling on the negatives. It doesn't really help, and it makes it worse. And there are some days where it's hard not to just dwell on those negatives, but I do my gosh darn best to not dwell on those negatives by it's almost as if by acknowledging and recognizing when something bad is happening, it's easier to move on, because you're not trying to pretend, you're not trying to hold that up, which is why, like, on my social media, I'm not afraid to talk about my bad days.
Which I love. I hate that it happens, but I love that we both do that to an extent.
Yeah, and that's really important to me, because and I've had people reach out to me on like Instagram, because I use I love hashtags, but there's a couple of hashtags that I use when something's going on with Ryan specifically, and it's caregiver diaries and also life after stroke, because I want people that are having similar things to be able to like find help that they need, and support. And so I've talked to a couple people on Instagram that have had their partner has had a significant stroke, or they themselves have had it and are reaching out to find help for their spouse, their partner, like how to manage and how to deal with things, because life can suck.
And the only good thing about the internet now is I mean, we've all been on a fun like internet shit party these past few months, but like, where do we shit on it? The internet. And I fucking hate most hashtags, and when I see them being used as they were originally intended to be used, as a way to publicly source and share information, I don't want to be like back when I used Twitter, or but it used to be like a super like just doing hashtag iOS was like, you would go and look at those and it would be like a cool source of news, and a different kind of person does this, but people do like tag Instagram posts like Monday Motivation, and they go through and they look at all of those, and I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with all of you? Oh, right, you're making each other happy. That's that's what's happening.
It's almost a concentration on the social side of it, like being able to like contribute to a social like conversation, whereas a lot of times too hashtags are like, oh, I need to do something specific to whatever that is only being used by me so I can find things again or whatever. So it depends on what you're using hashtags for and how you're utilizing it. And don't get me wrong, I also will use hashtags to add some subtext, some snarky little like extra conversations that's outside of the words, which is kind of fun.
Oh, for sure. And now, even as we're talking about this, like the whole like hashtag life goals, which is, the like little snarky thing, it's capitalism's ruined everything. Like that's like I was like, oh, when did hashtag stop becoming fun? It's when McDonald's started putting Monday motivations next to their McGriddles. I don't even know what they're called. And I am sitting and this is I don't know if people can hear that. I'm literally drinking a gigantic Diet Coke from McDonald's. And so it's not like we've talked about this before. It's not like I'm not engaging with capitalism, but wow, I'm gonna buy your shit anyway. Like
yeah, it's when businesses turn it into like work. And I mean, there are people that their only job is to manage hashtags. I mean, there are systems and programs and apps and websites you can use to figure out a hashtag or how best to leverage the hashtags, and that just makes me a little bit sick to my stomach.
Yeah, and it makes me sick to my stomach too. Not because I look down at those folks. I mean, like half of them are monsters, but half of the people who do like make podcasts and stuff are and board games are monsters. It's that these people are so smart. Like people who leverage SEO and stuff, so many of them are geniuses. And this is what we are using them for. People are, and I say that we are using them because, sure, there are a lot of people who choose to like go to Silicon Valley and be like, yeah, I'm definitely going to put my startup on the map. And exploit people and sell them like totally fake vitamins. I signed up for a vitamin service, but we'll talk about that a different time. I don't know. I might be putting like actual garbage into my body. But anyway, but there are so many people where, being a brand ambassador is the only job I have right now. And then I often think, what happens when they have a bad day? Like, private Twitter is now more and more becoming a thing because people can't, even if you're not posting on the Denny's account that like, man, really, my seasonal depression's really bad today, all of your bosses follow you and you can't put that on your own account. And I am very lucky that everybody I work with knows that I'm a sad disaster piece and nothing there obviously is something there's always going to be something performative about what you put on social media. Absolutely. And I have no problem with that, honestly. Like, I know that our lovely friend Merlin Mann gets sometimes frustrated with people who have performative conversations on Twitter, not because they are performative, but because people are trying to veil things in authenticity. Like, I have a ton of private conversations with most of the folks I interact with on Twitter, but sometimes it's just fun to be silly in public, like at a party. You're not sitting at a party, you're all goofing around. You're not, sitting on a couch with your best friend drinking wine or enjoying the devil's lettuce. It's just, this is a place to be silly. And when McDonald's comes in, why am I shitting on McDonald's? This Diet Coke's really good.
Because you enjoy it very much. I think it's easier to like use them as an example because you do contribute to their capitalist like enjoyableness or something.
Man, their frozen Cokes are so good. I love liquid chemicals.
I have a confession. I can't drink Coke. The only cola I can do is Pepsi.
Interesting.
They make my stomach hurt.
So is it no diet beverages or
nope,
no?
I can't, like the diet is fine. I don't like the taste of that fake sugar, but cola itself. So even like generic Safeway brand cola, whatever. I cannot do. The only cola type flavoring I can do is Pepsi.
Oh, there's nothing wrong. Bitch, please. I don't drink anything. I hate I hate high fructose corn syrup, and this is not a high horse. I love aspartame. In fact, I've stopped drinking most Diet Pepsi because there's no aspartame in it, and I love that good cancer fake sugar. It's so, I know it'll probably kill me, but hopefully it'll kill me slower than like cigarettes or other vices.
We're all dying anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least you'll go to the grave enjoying Pepsi, which has a way cooler logo, in my opinion.
It's very true.
Oh man, it's great.
Yes.